Bonjour tout le monde.
Good morning, everyone.
Very happy to be here this morning. I want to thank European Council President Charles Michel and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen for coming to Canada for this 19th Canada-European Union Summit. We got a reminder last night of just how close friends we are when we heard that your husband had been one of those thousands of people in Gander on the difficult days following 9/11 over 20 years ago. Just another example of the incredible bonds that unite us, not just as three friends here, but as countries and regions that are deeply, deeply connected in our hopes and aspirations, but also in our stories and our challenges. So it's a real pleasure. I have to tell you, people have been talking about that story and that connection all day. It really is incredibly touching. I want to thank Premier Fury and the people of Newfoundland for hosting us here in St. John's today. And we're here today, and if you could see it through the clouds, not far from Signal Hill, where the first transatlantic wireless signal came from Europe to North America, right here on this island, up at the top of that hill, connecting our two continents, connecting Canada and Europe in new ways. And that's what this summit is all about, building on those connections, because the world we're facing right now is incredibly challenging and violent conflicts around the world. And the thing is, none of them are discrete. They are all interconnected. And our ability to sit down as friends and partners aligned in values, understanding clearly the challenges coming at us, rolling up our sleeves and solving for them, sketching out the path forwards for how we're going to continue, not just to encourage peace, stability, security, prosperity in the world, but directly support citizens who are worried about the future, who are anxious about the present, and who need to see strong institutions and friendships and partnerships that are taking care of these big issues. Directly support citizens who are worried about the future, who are anxious about the present, and who need to see strong institutions and friendships and partnerships that are taking care of these big issues in a way that reassures and renders optimistic people around the world. On traverse une période de turbulence présentement. Il y a des conflits déchirants à travers le monde, des mouvements autoritaires qui minent les valeurs démocratiques, de l'inflation mondiale qui se fait sentir à l'épicerie. Et on voit les conséquences concrètes des changements climatiques. Dans un monde avec autant d'incertitudes, c'est plus important que jamais de renforcer nos liens avec nos amis. The great thing about our European partners is that, like Canada, they're approaching these challenges in a way that builds more opportunity and builds a better future that people can believe in. It's why we're moving forward on clean energy. Not only does this unwind people's dependence on Russia's weaponized energy exports, but it also fights climate change. A big part of what we're talking about is how Canada can help meet global demand. This means everything from the action Canada has taken to secure strong critical minerals supply chains so that we can build batteries for EVs, energy storage and tech devices, to the progress we're making on clean hydrogen, including, importantly, for exports to European markets. Par exemple, le projet d'hydrogène qu'on soutient ici dans l'Atlantique, Everwind, qui va produire de l'énergie pour alimenter l'économie allemande. C'est un projet qui va nous aider à livrer la marchandise suite à l'Alliance pour l'hydrogène entre le Canada et l'Allemagne qu'on a signé l'année dernière, ici à Terre-Neuve et Labrador. Le Canada est prêt à être le fournisseur d'énergie propre qu'un monde carboneutre a besoin. Et on le fait en créant de bons emplois chez nous et de la croissance économique des deux côtés de l'Atlantique. Lutter contre les changements climatiques, c'est aussi s'attaquer aux conséquences. On est tous confrontés à l'augmentation des catastrophes naturelles comme les feux de forêt. This summer, Canada had the worst wildfire season on record, and we were therefore deeply grateful to have hundreds of European firefighters come help us to get the blazes under control and keep people and our communities safe. But of course, as climate change is global, Europe has seen its own devastating fires too. So sharing resources and expertise is one of the best ways to deal with the impacts of climate change. And so today, I'm happy to confirm that Canada will be there to help our European friends with the latest version of de Havilland's iconic water bombers in a deal that will create good Canadian jobs, including in Alberta, where these aircraft will be manufactured. Yes, the Canadaires will be there to help Europe fight fires. On resserre aussi notre partenariat dans le cadre de la nouvelle alliance verte Canada-Union européenne qui va nous permettre de travailler ensemble pour lutter contre les changements climatiques tout en bâtissant un avenir propre et prospère. Travailler ensemble, ça a toujours été le fondement de notre partenariat. C'est comme ça qu'on a conclu l'accord de libre-échange entre le Canada et l'Europe, qui a fait croître le commerce transatlantique et qui s'assure qu'on ait des normes élevées en matière de main-d'œuvre et d'environnement. Good trade enables us all to grow our economies, support a strong middle class, and reinforce the values we believe in. And at a time when many of our democratic values are under threat, it's more important than ever that we work together. A great example of that is in Ukraine, where Ukraine continues to withstand Putin's illegal and violent assault on its people, its territories, and its very freedoms. And Ukraine continues to need support for their defense. That's why today I'm announcing that Canada is donating over 11,000 assault rifles and over 9 million rounds of ammunition being sourced from Colt Canada, which is based in Ontario. As leaders, all three of us, we continue to stand firmly together in pursuit of peace, stability, and prosperity in Ukraine, in the Middle East, and around the world. See, the peace and prosperity we've had for the last 8 decades has enabled extraordinary growth and opportunity. People have benefited from a strong middle class, a well-supported social safety net with health care, dental care, and child care, and the promise that they can raise their families in peace and with a good future. And we are here today as friends to help secure that promise for future generations. As leaders, we're continuing that work to ensure a future that is safe, that is clean air, that has great jobs, and where there is opportunity for everyone. Maintenant, je suis très content de passer la parole au président Michel. Ciao, mon ami.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Premier ministre, cher Justin. D'abord, merci pour l'accueil amical, merci pour l'accueil chaleureux. C'est à l'image du fondement des relations entre le Canada et l'Union européenne, la confiance et l'amitié. Cette confiance et l'amitié nous permet d'aller loin dans le degré de coopération, d'aller loin dans l'ambition partagée pour faire des efforts ensemble afin de rencontrer et d'être à la hauteur des défis auxquels nous faisons face. En réalité, notre génération politique, elle fait face à 3 défis qui sont autant de chocs en même temps. D'une part, tu l'as parfaitement dit, nous faisons face à un choc avec la nature, un choc avec notre environnement. Ça se traduit dans notre ambition commune d'adresser cette question du réchauffement climatique et des conséquences. Tu as mentionné les difficultés extrêmes au Canada et partout dans le monde. Nous devons être solidaires sur ces sujets-là. Le deuxième choc, c'est la transformation technologique radicale à laquelle nous faisons face. D'une part, le développement digital, d'autre part l'intelligence artificielle, y compris l'intelligence artificielle générative. Ça met à l'épreuve aussi nos sociétés et les relations entre chacun d'entre nous avec nos sociétés respectives. Le troisième choc auquel nous faisons face, il est directement lié à la confiance dans un monde fondé sur des règles, à la confiance dans la coopération internationale dans un moment où un certain nombre d'acteurs sur le plan global décident de tester ce monde qui était issu de la Deuxième Guerre mondiale, au départ desquels nous pensions avec sincérité volonté que la liberté, la démocratie, la dignité humaine doivent être au cœur de notre ambition commune. C'est dans ce contexte-là que notre génération, au Canada, en Europe, avec d'autres partenaires dans le monde, a une responsabilité. La responsabilité d'agir pour améliorer les conditions de vie, pour améliorer la prospérité. C'est le premier point. C'est une des promesses exprimées par les pères fondateurs du projet européen. Ça veut dire transformer ce défi climatique en opportunité, en occasion pour de l'investissement, pour de la technologie, pour des emplois de qualité pour nos citoyens partout au Canada, en Europe. Hier soir, on a pu rencontrer dans un cadre convivial des acteurs de cette transformation climatique. On rencontrera d'autres tout à l'heure encore ensemble. Être engagé pour faire en sorte que cette COP28 dans quelques jours soit un succès et que l'on délivre. Il ne suffit pas simplement d'affirmer des objectifs ambitieux. On doit délivrer, mettre en œuvre, respecter aussi nos engagements vis-à-vis des pays du Sud qui attendent de nous de la solidarité, de la responsabilité, et puis faire en sorte que ce défi énergétique soit rencontré. On veut vers une société où il y aura davantage d'électrification, ça suppose de transformer nos modèles, de transformer nos paradigmes et de coopérer beaucoup. On l'a mentionné d'ailleurs il y a quelques instants avec l'un ou l'autre des pays européens qui sont déjà engagés en plus des efforts communs au départ de l'Union européenne. Et puis la question digitale, c'est une question très centrale parce qu'on voit bien que nous faisons face maintenant à un monde où les données digitales, le big data, devient une ressource économique majeure. Et on va trouver le juste équilibre entre innovation, créativité, capacité aussi d'améliorer notre compétitivité en misant sur l'intelligence artificielle d'une part, et d'autre part veiller à ce que ces droits fondamentaux, la vie personnelle, les droits de l'homme, les droits humains soient respectés dans cette balance. Et pour cela, il y a la nécessité dans un cadre démocratique d'avoir ces débats de qualité au départ desquels on identifie quels principes, quels standards doivent être développés afin d'encadrer ces technologies au service des êtres humains, au service de nos sociétés. Et puis il y a un sujet qui est extrêmement important. This is a very important challenge we all face. This is related to the new technologies, especially the raw minerals. And here, your country, with others, you have a very important role to play. We had today, this morning, a very fruitful discussion about the way we can cooperate, the way we can work further together in that field. And you know that in Europe, within the EU, we have identified 34 critical raw minerals. In your country, you have 20 of those 34 critical raw minerals. This showing that we need to work together to improve our supply chains, to make sure that we can build our future prosperity, taking into account the need for respect for environment and for the respect for standards, which is fundamental for all of us. And then there's another very important level today, and I would like to insist on it. The fact that today we have agreed to develop a partnership in the field of this very important program in terms of research and innovation, Horizon, is a very important step because this program is the larger collaborative program in the world, and it shows that it's a huge opportunity for all our people in Canada and in Europe to work closely together and to try to make the best for this program. And then I would like also to say a few words of something which is important, which is this trade agreement, CETA. CETA, we remember when we negotiated this agreement, we faced some challenges, including in my own country, but CETA today, we should be proud to observe that this is an increase by 66% of the trade numbers between Canada and the EU for goods, 66 for goods, and 40% for services. It is showing the added value of such a trade agreement and the importance to do everything to maximize the benefits for our citizens today, but also the occasion to discuss at the global level the importance to believe in trade, in open markets, in open economy. For instance, we discussed the consequences for Canada, for the EU of this IRA decided by the United States and put in place by the United States, and the importance in a format like the G7, for instance, to cooperate and to make sure that we develop a competition based on the level playing field. Finally, one word on peace and security. We are liberal democracies, and we believe in peace, security, we believe in stability. And that's why it's not a surprise that we are exactly on the same page. We support Ukraine, and we'll support Ukraine for as long as it takes. On the EU side, we have already delivered 83 billion euros in support for Ukraine in various fields, financial dimension, military dimension, and we are ready to do more. In the weeks to come, we will make additional decisions. I'm optimistic with our member states in that field. We want to sanction Russia, but also the occasion to discuss the importance to avoid the circumventions of sanctions on the one hand, but also to identify what are the sectors in which maybe some additional steps will be needed in the future in coordination with our like-minded partners. And it's also very important to be a positive actor together to address the situation in the Middle East. That's why I reiterate that we condemn this terrible Hamas attack launched by Israel and its people. We support the right for Israel to defend itself, to defend its people, but it must be done in line with international law. We don't want double standards. It means that we need to address the humanitarian situation. This is good that some poses, a first pose has been decided, but it's very important that the humanitarian consequences are addressed, and we support the two-state solution, and we hope that as soon as possible it will be the occasion to discuss what are the concrete elements that are needed to make the two-state solution a possibility and to guarantee a sustainable peace in that region. We also discussed other challenges we face together, for instance, the foreign interferences and the importance to work closely together to prevent and to react together when we face such a situation. Arbitrary detentions is also a way to instill difficulties, and it's important also to stick to the principles and to stick to the rules. Enfin, on a aussi eu l'occasion d'aborder les questions de sécurité, les questions de défense. Je veux affirmer ici l'ambition de l'Union européenne et des États membres d'être un acteur plus engagé sur le terrain de la sécurité et de la défense. La majorité de nos États membres sont membres de l'OTAN, bien entendu, l'OTAN est un pilier essentiel pour cette sécurité transatlantique. Nous considérons que l'Union européenne et nos États membres avons une responsabilité pour préparer l'avenir, un avenir auquel les capacités de défense sont nécessaires au service de la paix et au service de la sécurité. Je conclue en indiquant ceci. Tu as choisi, cher Justin, de nous réunir dans un lieu qui est lourd de manière positive en symbole. Tu l'as mentionné, c'est de cette colline, Signal Hill, que le premier signal en morse a pu être transmis entre l'Europe et le Canada. Ça dit beaucoup. Et ça dit que cet océan est un océan qui nous rapproche, qui nous rassemble, qui nous réunit. Nous sommes une démocratie libérale. Nous avons la conscience de nos responsabilités. Nous avons la conscience que ce qui est au cœur de nos projets, c'est faire en sorte qu'il y ait un monde plus juste, plus stable, plus sécurisé, avec pour les femmes et les hommes que nous avons le devoir de représenter, qui soit un avenir plus prometteur, un avenir plus optimiste, un avenir avec plus de confiance. Et il y a un enjeu, parce qu'on mesure bien que le moment dans lequel on se situe est un moment avec des défis, avec des contraintes, mais aussi avec des occasions, des opportunités. Et encore une fois, l'amitié, le respect, la confiance sont les clés pour fonder ce partenariat, qui est un partenariat robuste et solide comme un roc.
Merci Charles. C'est un grand plaisir maintenant de passer la parole à ma chère amie Ursula von der Leyen.
Thank you very much, Justin. Thank you for hosting us here in St. John's, a truly exceptional place. We have experienced the fantastic hospitality. So thank you very much for that, and we had a very good summit. We had a very good summit, once again confirming the very strong alignment in our values and in our worldviews. And this is even more important today in a world that is rocked by multiple wars. Of course, we discussed the current situation in the Middle East. Nothing can justify Hamas' despicable terror attack on Israel on the 7th of October and the spiral of violence it triggered. I think we agree on fundamental points. First of all, we very much welcome the humanitarian pause to end the terrible ordeal of hostages held by Hamas and other terrorist groups. And I want to thank those who made it possible. Among many, especially President Biden, but also Israel, Qatar, and Egypt, with their tireless effort. And together we will continue to reach out with as much diplomatic passion as possible to make sure that all hostages are safely returned. The second point is, of course, to use this humanitarian pause to allow life-saving humanitarian aid to reach Gaza and to meet the needs of the civilians in Gaza. Since the announcement of the humanitarian pause, we have worked intensively to really increase the aid into Gaza as part of a humanitarian surge. Over the last month, the European Commission has quadrupled the humanitarian aid to the Palestinian people, now up to 100 million euros. And we have organized an air bridge. We have now the 17th flight into Al Arish in Egypt, round about 730 tons now that have gone to Egypt and then through Rafah border crossing point into Gaza. But of course, as more needs enter Gaza, and because Rafah's capacity is limited, we also have to work on other access points. For example, we're working with Cyprus on setting up a maritime corridor to Gaza. The third point is we must prevent violence from spreading, and therefore a peaceful coexistence is only possible with a two-state solution. We very much agree on that one. The Palestinian people and the Arab neighbors need the reassurance that there will be no forced displacement, but a viable perspective with an independent Palestinian state, Gaza and West Bank reunited and governed by a reformed Palestinian Authority. And to this end, the unacceptable violence by extremists in the West Bank has to stop. Of course, we also discussed the situation in Ukraine. And from day one on in this war, Canada and the European Union have worked closely together. Many thanks for that cooperation. Indeed, today the EU and the member states have provided to Ukraine over 85 billion euros in aid. This includes the 25 billion euros for military equipment. But I first and foremost want to commend Canada, because you have been at Ukraine's side already before Russia's aggression in March 2022. It was your strong engagement of that time, training the Ukrainian troops, that was key to enable Ukrainians to resist the very first wave of this senseless aggression. Of course, today, both the European Union and Canada continue to train Ukrainian armed forces together. Looking at us, the European Union, we have now 30,000 troops already trained, so we are on track to meet our target of 40,000 we wanted to reach this year still. It is vital that the European Union and Canada, along with other partners, maintain the strong backing for Ukraine. Ukraine needs more military assistance and predictable and reliable economic support. That is why we have proposed a 50 billion euro financial support package for Ukraine for the next 4 years. This will go into the G7 donors platform that is associated with the reforms that have to be done. And here I also want to thank you, Justin, that you sent now your expert to our G7 donor platform. It's very important to have the personnel, so thank you for the liaison officer that you sent. And we continue to maintain pressure on Russia with effective sanctions and close coordination with other G7 partners. And in this context, the European Commission will soon propose how to use revenues that are generated from the management of the immobilized Russian assets, because the perpetrator must be held accountable. Now, we have a very strong bilateral relationship too, and I want to mention of the many topics that we have discussed four. The first is indeed innovation. I am delighted that we were able today to announce that our flagship program, Horizon Europe, is joined by Canada. This means that Canada will participate on equal terms with EU countries. This is great news. Horizon Europe invests 100 billion euros over 7 years in cutting-edge research. It's a fantastic opportunity to pool our best minds and the best talents on both sides of the Atlantic. And jointly, we will work on the next generation of all these exciting new clean technologies, but also biotech, digital projects, you name it. I think the numbers, the figures are telling that you are one of our most trusted partners in Horizon. If you look at the old program that went from 2014 to 2020, we called it Horizon 2020, Canada was ranking third among the, at that time, non-associated countries, right after the United States and China, with over 500 projects and over 400 grants agreement. Now, if you look at the new program, which you are joining now, you have been already working in this program intensively, because Canada has already gotten over 100 grant agreements. Now, this association of today will give it a big boost, and I'm very much looking forward to that. Second point is trade. In these difficult years, with the COVID pandemic and Russia's war in Ukraine, CETA has helped us enormously to resist the pressure. And in those 6 years now, it has delivered. Our trade in goods has grown by 66%, that's huge. The trade actually in services has also grown by 11%. So this results in 118 billion euros traded in goods and services last year. That's quite a success. We can achieve even more by working together, and here I also want to shed a light on the critical raw materials. Working together on critical raw materials strengthens our supply chains in our strategic industries. These are the digital and the clean industries. And it strengthens, of course, the European independence from single supplier, where we have an overdependence. So I want to extend a warm invitation to Canada to join our Critical Raw Materials Club, which we will launch at COP28. Canada is indeed in a pole position what critical raw materials are concerned. You are today the country, the only country in the Western Hemisphere with all the raw materials required for a lithium battery. You have it all. Canada exports 90% of its mineral products, and the European Union is Canada's second largest export market. So I would say this is a perfect match. Let's work on that one. Third point is the Green Alliance that we launched today. It's about cooperation on clean energy and green technology. Canada is very rich with clean energy capabilities. For example, the wind power supply to the European Union that you're giving to us. This helps us a lot to reach our net zero goal. And we have a few points that we've discussed today. The first one is that the European Union will now formally join the Global Carbon Pricing Challenge launched by Canada. So we will work together on also developing carbon markets and looking at standards for carbon credits. Our mutual aim is to increase innovation and to decrease emissions. And the second element is where I'm very glad about that we want to boost transatlantic hydrogen trade. We need to develop this strategic industry, the green hydrogen, on both sides of the Atlantic. And therefore today we're launching this joint green hydrogen roadmap to develop the market on both sides, so the supply and the demand, which is very important for the European Union and also for our partner Canada. The fourth and last point I want to mention is the digital transition. Indeed, also today we launched the digital partnership that helps us to strengthen, for example, the semiconductor supply chain, increase our cooperation in artificial intelligence. A lot has been said on that one. And to cooperate on cyber threats. Here, the strategic discussion and exchange of knowledge that we have between Canada and the European Union is of utmost importance. And in the same spirit, we have just reached a passenger name record agreement. This is very good news. Many thanks for that. It will make us more efficient in the fight against crime and terrorism, in full respect of the fundamental rights of privacy and of data protection, because as you said, we share the same vision, that innovation should be at the service of people and be in line with our democratic values. Voilà, cher Justin, le résumé de nos discussions denses, mais avant tout animées par l'unique amitié qui lie le Canada et l'Europe et qui nous lie personnellement. Merci beaucoup.
Nous allons maintenant commencer avec la période des questions. First question is to Peter. Mr. Trudeau, did you discuss the ongoing EU seal ban during your meeting, and if so, what did you say? And for our European leaders, what would you say to a local seal hunter here in Newfoundland and Labrador who feels that the ban is unjust, given as they believe the hunt is ethical, sustainable, and humane?
Obviously, this is a complex time in the world, and there's a lot of subjects to discuss. We spent a lot of time on a whole bunch of different things. The conversations that Canada has continued to have with our EU counterparts on defending the seal harvest in Canada as an important part of local economies, an important part of protecting our fisheries as well, will continue. These are it's sometimes a challenge with good friends like this to find issues where there are points of, things to work through, points of contention, and this is certainly one that we will continue to work on with our European friends in defending this important part of lives and livelihood in Canada. But there are so many other things that we are working together on. I'm going to continue to stay positive about everything that we're engaging with.
Nous allons continuer d'être engagés pour défendre cette activité économique importante pour les gens ici à Terre-Neuve et Labrador, mais aussi dans d'autres régions. C'est un différent que nous avons avec nos partenaires européens. On va continuer de souligner à quel point c'est important.
Yes, I think we found a good balance. As you know, we have a system in place that does not allow in the European Union the placing of seal products on the EU market. However, there are exceptions with regards to seal products deriving from hunts conducted by Inuit and other indigenous communities who can continue exporting to the European Union market. And as far as I am informed, this system is working well.
And a question on hydrogen for the European leaders. Canadian companies are investing billions in developing green hydrogen projects here, especially on the East Coast. The product they're going to be producing is a lot more expensive than existing energy options, even grey hydrogen, for example. What are you doing in order to ensure that when these projects are up and running, the demand and markets are there in Europe?
Well, so there are several options. First of all, we have the European Green Deal, and within the European Green Deal there are goals for hydrogen import to the European Union. By 2030 we want to import 10 million tons of green hydrogen. So we have to boost the market, the supply and the demand. And for that there are different possibilities. For example, within the European Green Deal, it is clear that certain standards have to be met if you want to import green hydrogen to the European market. This is an advantage for the producers that have, of course, additional costs because of the greening of the hydrogen. There's also a second instrument that we have developed now to boost this young market as fast as possible. That is our hydrogen bank. The hydrogen bank gives money, capital, to projects for green hydrogen. And the call goes the following. It says, show me your product, and the most cost-effective products, I will give the money for the green premium that is on top, the extra cost that you have for being green hydrogen. So it's competitive, but it gives capital into greening the hydrogen. And we've done that for the European market lately, and in a few months we will start it for the international market. So for Canadian companies, it might be very interesting to apply for this auction.
I was smiling at this question because it was a point of discussion that we had a very good conversation about during our bilateral.
Just one word, because Ursula answered the question, but this is very important this is very important for the European Council and the EU and the Member States to be extremely serious on the topic, because we understand very well that we need a strategy in terms of energy. That's why we've decided to triple the renewable energy and to double the energy efficiency, which is very important in preparation of the COP28. And certainly this green hydrogen will be an important piece in the puzzle, in the global puzzle. And that's why this Green Alliance that we have launched today will be also a very useful framework to go more into the details, in depth, and to identify how we will make sure that we will reach our common goals.
Hi there, my question is for the Prime Minister and the European leaders, and please respond in French and English if possible. Canada has now signed on to Horizon Europe. What are the details of this agreement in terms of deliverables, and when could domestic companies see money flowing from new European partners?
Well, as was pointed out, domestic companies, Canadian companies, are already benefiting from Horizon and have for many years. But there is much more that we'll be able to access now that we are full partners. It is an exciting articulation of what have been long-standing partnerships between scientists across on both sides of the Atlantic, great Canadian scientists, great European partners. We will continue, and we will see more and more advanced work being done in all the areas that matter to us. Ça fait longtemps que les compagnies canadiennes profitent de ces investissements liés à Horizon. Maintenant, avec cette annonce, il va en avoir encore plus, et on va avoir resserré encore plus les liens entre nos scientifiques des deux côtés de l'Atlantique.
Je veux ajouter que ce choix de s'inscrire ensemble dans une ambition pour ce projet de coopération entre chercheurs et scientifiques d'Horizon, ça traduit aussi nos principes fondamentaux. Nous croyons dans la science. Nous croyons dans l'intelligence collective et nous croyons aussi dans la coopération sur ce sujet-là pour rencontrer les défis auxquels nous sommes confrontés. Et ce projet Horizon est depuis de nombreuses années maintenant le projet le plus important dans le monde en termes de coopération entre scientifiques et chercheurs. Donc ce pacte supplémentaire qui est réalisé va donner un potentiel extraordinaire aux chercheurs au Canada, en Europe, aux scientifiques pour travailler ensemble, pour croiser leurs réflexions, pour développer ce que
bring together their thinking to create this collective intelligence at a moment in time when people are tempted to question the importance of science, technology and research. So that's another sign that we want to deal with.
The association of Canada to Horizon is the deepest form of research and innovation collaboration that we can offer as the European Union. From now on, Canadian researchers and organizations will be able to take part in calls, that's very important for them, and to receive Horizon funding on equal term with their EU colleagues. And Canadian scientists will also have access, and that's also important for them, to the networks of researchers. This is always the premium in the European Union and in other associated countries, because there are huge multinational networks, of course, in these complex research questions. The negotiations are concluded, so we expect the agreement to be signed soon, before mid-next year. And once this is done, researchers in Canada will be able to receive funding from Horizon.
Thank you very much. My question now is for the Prime Minister. You have said this temporary humanitarian pause for the hostage release is a good first step on the way to peace, but you've stopped short of calling for a ceasefire. Do you think a ceasefire is needed now, yes or no?
I've continued to call for a need for lasting peace in the region, including a two-state solution. We know there are going to be many steps along that path, but we've been calling for weeks for a significant humanitarian pause. It is progress that we have that right now, but there are many more steps we're going to have to take on together, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Okay.
Ça fait des semaines
French.
que nous appelons, entre autres, pour une pause significative humanitaire pour permettre à la libération des otages, à de l'aide humanitaire, à se rendre aux civils à Gaza et aussi à la protection des civils. On comprend qu'il va y avoir beaucoup d'étapes à franchir avant d'avoir une paix durable, avant de se retrouver avec une solution à 2 États. Et nous allons devoir travailler pour franchir chacune de ces étapes.
Next question.
Une question pour les 3 leaders. Émilie Bergeron,
Question
la
for the
presse
3
canadienne.
leaders from Presse
Monsieur
Canadienne.
Trudeau, le mois dernier,
Trudeau,
vous avez
last
annoncé
month,
une première exemption, une première
you
brèche
announced
dans
our
votre
first
tarification
exemption
du carbone,
in
une politique qui est
the
vue
carbon
comme un exemple
pricing.
à l'international. Est-ce
And
que
this was
l'étoile
a
du Canada
leading
en
example
matière de prix sur la
internationally?
pollution
Does that
scintille moins aujourd'hui?
that
Et pour
we're
les leaders européens,
not shining
il
so
y a aussi des
brightly?
brèches
And then for
dans les
European
politiques
leaders, there's
européennes en matière
also
de
gaps now
prix
when
sur
it
la
comes
pollution,
to
étant donné la
European
guerre en Ukraine.
pollution
Alors,
pricing
quand on
policies
conçoit
because of the war in
des
Ukraine.
politiques
So
comme cela,
when we're
est-ce
designing
que
this
c'est
type
le
of
but d'ajouter peu à
policy,
peu des échappatoires
is the aim
au
to
fil
then
de
have certain
l'instabilité du monde?
loopholes because of the questions of
Merci pour la
instability in the
question.
world?
Je pense que
Thank
c'est
you for
très
that
important de
question.
comprendre à
I think
quel
it's very
point
important to
la
understand
tarification du carbone
how
est un
important
outil
carbon pricing
important,
actually is.
non
It's an
seulement pour lutter
important
contre les
tool,
changements
not just
climatiques,
to fight
mais
against
aussi
climate
pour
change,
créer des
but
opportunités
also to
économiques pour
create
nos
economic
entrepreneurs, pour nos
opportunities for
familles, pour
entrepreneurs
aider avec le
and
coût de la
our
vie.
families, and to
Et
help
c'est
with the
pour ça
cost
qu'on
of
a fait le
living.
choix
And that is why we've
de
made this
suspendre
choice
le prix sur la
to
pollution
suspend the
sur
price on
l'huile
pollution
de chauffage
when it comes to
spécifiquement.
home
Et ça,
heating oil
parce qu'on se
specifically.
donne
We've
3 ans
done this because we're giving
pour créer
ourselves
une
3 years
transition massive
to create a
de l'huile de
massive
chauffage
transition
vers
from
des
home
thermopompes
heating oil
électriques qui
towards
sont
electric
moins chères,
heat pumps that are
moins
less
polluantes
expensive, pollute
et
less,
plus faciles à utiliser à
and
bien des niveaux.
easier to use
Alors,
on lots of different
les
levels.
investissements qu'on est en train de
So
faire
the
en
investments
tant
that
que
we're
gouvernement fédéral, en
making
partenariat
as a federal
avec les
government in
provinces, c'est
partnership
pour
with the provinces
justement
are being made
pouvoir transitionner
Indeed, to
vers
be able to make
des
this
émissions,
transition
des émissions moindres, mais
towards
aussi
less
l'abordabilité pour les
and
familles.
also tackle
Donc,
affordability for
c'est
families.
une façon
So that's
d'aller chercher ce
one
qu'on
way
veut, c'est que
of
de
achieving
réduire
what
les
we want to
émissions
achieve,
et
namely
d'aider
to
avec le coût
reduce
de la vie.
emissions and
Comme j'ai
also help
dit,
with the cost of living.
c'est
As
une
I've said,
suspension temporaire,
it's a temporary
limitée, et ce
suspension
sera
that's
la seule
limited, and it will be
exception
the
que nous ferons.
only exception
Sur ce
that we
point,
will
je voudrais
make.
indiquer que
On this
l'Union
point,
européenne, il y
I'd
a
like to
4
say
ans,
the
après une
European
décision
Union 4 years
stratégique
ago took
majeure en
a
disant nous
major
allons faire de l'Union
strategic
européenne
decision and said
un
the
continent
European
neutre
Union
sur le
is
plan
going to
climatique à
become
l'horizon
a climate
2050.
neutral
C'est un objectif
continent by
ambitieux qui a été
2050.
fixé,
This is an ambitious objective
décidé par les
that was
27 chefs
set, it
d'État
was
et de gouvernement
decided upon by the
européens.
27
On a vu que dans les
heads
années
of
qui ont
state of
suivi,
government, and we've seen in
plusieurs
the years
grands pays, grandes
in
régions
the
dans le monde
meantime,
se sont
many
progressivement
other
alignés
regions
sur
in
cet
the world
objectif,
have
peut-être pas
aligned
toujours
themselves with this
exactement à la
objective,
même date,
not
mais en tout
always
cas
at
en
exactly the
suivant
same date,
cette tendance
but
qui a
they
été fixée
certainly
par
are
l'Union européenne,
following
c'est un
this
premier
trend
point.
that was
2,
set by the
nous
European
pensons
Union.
en
That's
effet
our
depuis
first point. And
longtemps
secondly,
au sein de l'Union
for a
européenne
long
que
time now within the
l'instrument de la
European Union, we
tarification
believe
du
that the
carbone
instrument
est un
of
instrument
carbon
puissant
pricing
et
is a
plutôt
powerful
efficace pour
and quite
encourager des
effective
changements de
instrument
comportement
to
d'une
bring
part
about
et
changes
pour
in
donner un
behavior
signal à
and
nos
also
acteurs
to send a
économiques
signal
afin
to our
qu'ils puissent
economic
identifier quels
actors
sont
so
les
that
espaces
they
pour
can
des investissements
identify
qui soient
spaces
compatibles
for
avec cet
investments to
engagement
make that are
climatique. Donc nous
compatible
pensons qu'il y a un
with these
gisement de
climate
développement économique et
commitments
d'emploi
so that
au sein de
we
cette
can
stratégie de
actually have a
tarification
source for job
du
creation
carbone.
thanks
Il y a
to
un
this
troisième point
carbon
qui est
pricing
important,
strategy.
c'est la
And there's a
transition.
third point
Cette
that's
transition
important,
doit
the
être
transition.
équitable,
This
doit être
transition needs
juste
to be
et c'est
fair
compliqué. Et on a
and
chacun nos
equitable. It
réalités
is
sur le
complicated.
plan
We have to
européen et
deal
dans nos
with
États
our
membres,
own
au
realities, the
Canada.
European
On a
Union, and
trouvé donc
member
le
states
chemin
and in Canada.
équilibré
So
pour ne
we've
jamais perdre de vue
found a
l'objectif
balance,
général,
absolutely
mais en
don't
même temps
lose sight
veiller
of the
à ce
general
que nos
objective.
populations,
At
et
the same time,
singulièrement
we want to
les
make
plus
sure that our
vulnérables,
population,
soient
and in
soutenues
particular the most
afin de
vulnerable,
pouvoir
should be
mobiliser
supported
un large assentiment, un large soutien de nos populations à cet
mobilize a great
objectif
deal
commun
of
pour
support
reculer
and
cette menace
buy-in amongst
climatique en le
the
faisant
population
d'une
to
manière
fight
qui
against this
nous permet de
climate
conserver une
threat
adhésion
and do it in
très
a way
sincère et
that
très
allows
forte
us still to
de nos
have
populations et de
sincere
nos entreprises.
buy-in from our companies and our
So
citizens.
indeed, a centerpiece or at the heart of the European Green Deal is the emission trading system, our way to put a price on carbon. And we've made a very good experience with that. First of all, it is market-driven. It nudges the industry to decide if you want to pollute, you have to pay a price for that. If you want to avoid the pollution, you innovate into clean technologies. So putting a price on emission drives investment in clean technologies up and generates, besides that, also revenues. I give you a few figures that show how successful this system is. We've started it in 2005. And since then, our economy grew by 65%, while the emissions decreased by 35%. So you see, we developed the market, the industry, while getting cleaner. And it has generated 150 billion since then, which we have then reinvested in innovation for clean technologies and social compensation for the vulnerable groups. Now, you said that the Russian war in Ukraine put pressure on us heavily. What fossil fuels is, we had to diversify away from the Russian fossil fuels. And indeed, at the beginning, my worry was also that we might create a lock-in in fossil fuels, but the opposite is the case. If you look back into 2022, last year, which was our worst year with a heavy energy crisis, while we got out of the dependencies of Russian fossil fuels, we have seen that the economy grew by 3.5%, while the emissions decreased by 2.5%, so good. And even better, for the very first time, because we invested massively in renewables, for the very first time we have produced in the European Union more electricity from wind and sun than from gas. So the direction of travel is a good one.
En question de relance, une question pour Monsieur Trudeau seulement, et si possible de répéter en anglais à la toute fin. L'été dernier, Monsieur le Premier ministre, vous avez dit, vous avez reconnu qu'il n'y a pas assez d'avions citernes au Canada pour faire face à des saisons records que nous voyons
bombers to deal with the type of season with forest fires that we've been seeing. But you reiterated yesterday that the first new model of Bombardier water bomber will be sent to Europe. So how can you explain this discordance, this difference? First of all, it's very good news that we're going to be building new water bombers here in Canada to help our friends in Europe.
On se doit de continuer d'être présents et généreux les uns pour les autres et de savoir que les Européens ont besoin de plus d'avions citernes. On va les construire, on va les leur vendre, on est très content de ça. En même temps, en développant et en améliorant cette industrie ici au Canada, avec ces avions qui sont très fiables depuis très longtemps, on va pouvoir créer des plus d'opportunités pour en avoir à la disposition de la population
can be made available to the Canadian population in the areas that will need.
I think it is a good news. It is very good news that de Havilland will be building even more of the water bombers that the world needs, given the extreme weather events we're seeing around the world. And Canada is not one of those countries that will prevent its friends from getting the supports they need to fight the same extreme weather events that we're facing all around the world. Indeed, as we see great jobs created primarily in Alberta, where these aircraft are created, but also across the country with investments in innovation as well. This is good for the Canadian economy, but it's also good for creating water bombers that will also be helping Canada in the coming years.
Question, question?
Bonjour, Valérie Bain de Radio-Canada. Ma question s'adresse à nos invités européens. En français, s'il vous plaît. Donc, on a ici au Canada une opposition officielle fédérale qui a voté contre la nouvelle mouture de l'accord de libre-échange avec l'Ukraine parce qu'il est question sur le carbone
because carbon pricing is included in this agreement. How do you react to that? Is it worrisome for you? First of all, I don't want to comment on the internal situation nor the national political debate. That is under the responsibility and authority of Canada, but it's quite certain that on the European side we're determined, we're resolved to support Ukraine, and we do not want to use arguments that might seem like excuses to step back in our support for Ukraine. We have a very resolute position on this. We've already mobilized 83 billion euros for Ukraine. We'll continue with financial and military and political support.
à l'adhésion pour l'Union européenne, à ce pays, l'Ukraine, ainsi qu'à d'autres pays du continent européen, la Moldavie, mais d'autres également. Donc nous avons une position très très forte, très très ferme, et je me réjouis qu'aujourd'hui, dans ce sommet, nous avons réaffirmé, sans être intimidés par qui que ce soit et par quiconque, notre détermination à continuer à être aux côtés de la souveraineté territoriale, du droit international, de la Charte des Nations Unies, de la démocratie et de la liberté de ces valeurs qui nous rassemblent. Il n'y a pas de surprise. Nous avons une position très forte qui a été exprimée ensemble ce matin.
Perhaps I can add to all what has been rightly said, that we also have partially opened our single market for Ukrainian goods. And this has shown to be very effective because it made it possible to have more seamless cross-border exchange of goods from Ukraine to the European Union, but actually also the other way around. And that generates income for Ukraine and is, of course, both on both sides of the border good for the economy, an added value.
Et ma deuxième question s'adresse à vous, Monsieur Trudeau.
And I have a second question
Comme
for you,
votre
Mr.
leader
Trudeau.
parlementaire, Madame Gould, est-ce que vous voyez dans l'attitude des conservateurs
when it comes to the
avec la position de certains élus républicains qui mettent
do you
en
think it's
doute
similar to certain
l'aide qu'on doit accorder à
Republicans'
l'Ukraine?
position who are questioning the aid to be granted to Ukraine?
Le Canada est un des pays
Canada
au monde
is one of
qui
the
a été le
countries
plus
in the
solidaire
world that has
avec
shown the
l'Ukraine
most
depuis le début
solidarity
de la guerre,
with
mais
Ukraine
depuis
since the
bien
beginning
avant
of the war,
cela
and
aussi.
even long
On
before
a
the
une
war.
grande population
We have
ukrainienne
a
qui est là
big
depuis
Ukrainian
100 ans.
population who has been
On
here in
partage
Canada
des
for
valeurs, on
100
partage une
years. We
vision
share
pour
values, we
l'avenir,
share a
et
vision
je
for
le dis
the
bien
future.
souvent,
And as
mais on l'a
I've said
soutenu
often,
ensemble
we
en tant que Parlement bien souvent, que
have
nous allons
often
être là pour
expressed
l'Ukraine
parliamentary
avec tout ce
support
que ça
together, that
prend
we
pendant
will
aussi
stand with
longtemps que ça
Ukraine,
prendra.
whatever it takes
D'ailleurs,
and for
dans mes
as long
conversations
it
avec
takes.
Ursula au
And in
fil
the
des années
conversations
sur
with Ursula
les sanctions,
over the
sur
years
l'aide
on
militaire,
sanctions
on
and
voit à quel
military
point on est
assistance,
là,
we've really seen
on fait
that we are
partie
there,
de
we
la
are
première ligne
part of the first
dans l'appui
line
de
of
l'Ukraine.
supporters standing with Ukraine.
Alors de voir
So,
le Parti
to
conservateur du
see the
Canada
Conservative Party of Canada
prendre la décision de ne pas
taking the
appuyer
decision to
l'Ukraine dans
not
quelque chose dont
support
ils ont besoin,
Ukraine in something
avec
that they need,
l'excuse
with
absurde
the absurd
que c'est parce que l'Ukraine s'en
excuse
va
that
vers
it's
mettre le prix
because
sur la pollution, un prix sur
Ukraine
la
is
pollution.
going to put a price on pollution.
C'est ridicule.
That's really ridiculous.
Alors il faut se poser la question, pourquoi
that then
est-ce
begs the
que les
question,
conservateurs au Canada
why
ont décidé de ne pas
Canadian
être, de ne plus être
Conservatives
là
decided
pour
to
l'Ukraine?
no longer be there for Ukraine?
Eh bien malheureusement, et c'est pas juste
Unfortunately,
les MAGA républicains aux
and it's not
États-Unis,
just the MAGA Republicans
mais on le
down
voit
in the
un peu à
US,
travers le
but
monde, y
we
compris
are
en
seeing
Europe,
this throughout the world, including
que des partis et
in
des
Europe,
politiciens
that
de droite et
certain,
d'extrême droite
right-wing and
retirent
extreme
leur
right-wing
appui
political parties
pour
are
l'Ukraine et
withdrawing their
commencent à
support for Ukraine
utiliser
and are starting
des excuses et des
to come
raisons
up with excuses
fournies par Vladimir
and
Poutine.
Reasons that have been provided
Alors oui, ça me
by
préoccupe
Vladimir
énormément
Putin. So yes, this is
de voir le
extremely
Parti conservateur
worrisome.
du Canada
It really concerns me to see
tourner
the
le dos
Conservative
sur
Party of
l'Ukraine,
Canada turning their back on
parce que
Ukraine.
c'est pas qui nous sommes en tant que Canadiens,
Because
c'est
that's
pas ce
not
qu'on
who
a
we are as
démontré
Canadians. That's
depuis
not what we've been
des années. Et c'est effectivement
demonstrating
la
for
montée
years
de
now.
la droite américaine
It's
et
the
de la
rise
droite
of
un
the
peu partout dans le
American
monde
right and the
qui
rise of the
démontre
right
son
throughout the
influence,
world,
que
which is showing
tous
its
les
influence.
députés conservateurs
All
au Canada
the
ont
Conservative
voté
MPs in
contre
Canada
l'Ukraine.
voted against
C'est du jamais
Ukraine.
vu et on
This is something
on
we've
se
never
serait pas attendu.
seen, and it really was not
I'll
expected.
just repeat it in English. Canada has been one of those countries that has been the most steadfast with Ukraine. In my many conversations with Ursula about the sanctions we've brought in together, the military support, the financial support that we've had over the years, every step of the way, I've stood up and said, Canada will be there with everything it takes for as long as it takes to support Ukraine. And I've actually boasted to her and to others that it's not a political debate in Canada. All parties in Canada stand with Ukraine. So it is particularly troubling to see, even though we are seeing a rise
of right-wing rhetoric in the United States with MAGA conservatives, across Europe in certain corners, of right-wing politicians and parties starting to pull their support for Ukraine, starting to parrot Russian disinformation and misinformation and propaganda, that suddenly the Conservative Party of Canada would choose to not stand with Ukraine in something that they need, that the Ukraine has asked for, and to use the frankly absurd excuse that it's because Ukraine will be bringing in a price on pollution in the coming years. Obviously, that's an excuse, but it's not the real story. The real story is the rise of a right-wing American MAGA-influenced thinking that has made Canadian conservatives, who used to be among the strongest defenders of Ukraine, and I'll admit it, turn their backs on something Ukraine needs in its hour of need. That is the danger of the rise of the right-wing influence that is feeling its impact in Canada. That's what not just Ukrainian Canadians, but all Canadians should be concerned about when the Conservative Party of Canada and Pierre Poilievre turn their backs on history, turn their backs on our friends and allies, turns their backs on the international rules-based order and our support for the UN Charter and territorial integrity. It is of real concern and should be of concern to all of us because we're seeing that spiking up all around the world.
This concludes the press conference. Thank you very much.
So, my friend.
Thank you.